You are watching BetSafe. We are talking 2017 Formula One with myself, Pete Colley, and Mr. Johnny Herbert as ever. And Johnny, we have a winner.
Done deal. Yes, Lewis Hamilton. Expected, I guess, wasn't it, down the line? But wasn't it exciting? It wasn't quite the way we expected it to be, because everybody sort of started. We sort of had Vettel on pole, which you need to have. But then we had the youngster, Verstappen, second on the grid. And of course then it was Lewis as well, just that little bit further back. But it all went a little bit pear-shaped, didn't it? Sort of going towards turn 2 and 3, where all sort of the comings togethers sort of happened, and basically put the two sort of drivers going for the championship right to the back of the pack. But of course the man who was not needing to be at the back of the pack was Sebastian Vettel, and that really then made the race interesting in a way, because he had to come back to try and get himself in a position of getting third, I think it was, to then just move the championship on one more race. But he failed to do that, finished fourth, and it wasn't quite to happen. Lewis did exactly what he needed to do, didn't rush himself in any way, picked his way through the pack, got into that top 10, needed 9th, got it, no problem at all. So overall, I think he's done a cracking season, Lewis Hamilton, to be honest. He's been very intelligent the whole way through it. He's done what he's needed to do. And once again, in difficult circumstances that we had in Mexico, he did it again.
Was it a disappointing way to win it? I mean, do you not want to stride through and have some sort of Hollywood finish to it all, or did he just do what he needed to do and took the title?
No, I think a bit of a Hollywood, I think, would have been something that he would have loved to have done. And he was disappointed. He did say it wasn't the way that he wanted to win it. And again, that's what I like about Lewis. He wanted to go there, he wanted to win, and he wanted to sort of stamp his authority and just saying that I've won the championship now, but I also won it when I won the race as well. So there was a bit air of disappointment from his side. But then also he knows that he achieved it. And he still had a difficult situation starting as far back as he did to actually get himself back into that 9th place. Expected to a degree, but it wasn't simplistic at the end of the day. He just sort of burned his way through the pack and ended up sort of in the top 4 or 5. He just about got into that 9th place, but he did it in a very steady, sort of clever mentality that sometimes you need as a racing driver. You've got to think about what's going on. There was still radio communication where he was saying, right, where am I? Just so he was aware of the whole situation that was going on, which normally means he just wants to then push that little bit more if he's not quite far enough up the pecking order. But at the end of the day, did the job.
And now, 4 times winner, we are even talking about Sir Lewis Hamilton. I mean, we're putting him up there with, I don't know, Richard Branson, Elton John. I mean, does 4 times winner, does that get you that? What do you think, Sir Lewis?
Well, I think in many respects we've seen it in other sports where sort of a knighthood comes your way. We've seen it with cricketers that have been able to do that. So with Lewis being special because now he's the only British driver to win those 4 world titles, I honestly think it's something that he does deserve, and I hope everybody out there thinks exactly the same, because it's not an easy thing to do. You've always got to have the motivation to be able to get yourself in the right mindset when you get into the car itself, and I think he's been able to achieve that. It is 4. I think there will be more as well coming his way, because I think he still has the hunger to do it. He's already said about with Max Verstappen, I need to up my game because this young boy is going to be a big threat. So that proves to me that he still wants it, still wants to push himself even further, because there's new blood coming along which is pushing him as well, which is what he enjoys. He never wants to win a race in an easy way. He wants to fight. He wants to have someone battling him with him, and I think that's what he's had actually this year with Sebastian, because he's had it for the majority of the season. And he's been strong and he's fought through the whole year, and that's why he's ended up world champion. So in many regards, Sir Lewis Hamilton, got a nice ring to it, I guess.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. And what do we think? Driver of the Mexico F1, who was the outstanding driver for you?
Well, I think I've got to go to the man who was, second on the grid, was able to have an easy race win. It's quite interesting, actually, what I said about Lewis, where he wants to have a fight with another driver, if that is Max or if that's even Sebastian. And then it's been Max recently coming out and saying, I want to dominate, I want to win easy. Completely different mental approach to the whole sort of ball game of winning races. Lewis wants to battle it, Sebastian wants to have a little battle as well. Max just wants to just sail off into the distance and win it by a lap. So it's a completely different scenario. But I think Max drove brilliantly in Mexico. I think he had they surprised me actually. They surprised how good that Red Bull was, and I think even sort of their Tagoya Renault power unit actually was very, very good as well. Because even on that start, when the slipstreaming came into effect going in towards turn 1, when Max actually pulled out of Sebastian Vettel, he didn't sort of hit a brick wall and just sort of fall back. He actually stayed level with that Ferrari as well. So it just showed that the power unit was working very well as well. So for me, Max.
At the start of the season, we mustn't forget that it was Sebastian Vettel that really went out into the distance. It was Lewis chasing him, wasn't it? So there are two halves to a season. So where does Sebastian Vettel now? How does he look at himself? He's lost it. I mean, and Lewis has only equalled him though, isn't he? I think 4 each.
4 each.
Yeah. So for everything that Lewis has done, and we're all talking about him being Sir Lewis, he's only equalled Sebastian Vettel really in a career, isn't he?
Yeah, it is. Sebastian Vettel. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, you know, he's only achieved exactly the same as what Sebastian has. But of course, Sebastian did it in the Red Bull, where at least Lewis has done it in a McLaren and a Mercedes. But you have to, you know, put it into, I don't know, a situation that we had this year. Ferrari really did make a comeback. Sebastian was there, he was ready, he was hungry, and he wanted to achieve those race wins that he got very, very early on in the season. Sadly, it all went a little bit awry, but the actual championship, the battle that we've had, and the battles that are going to continue even for these last 2 races, you know, they're not going to go there and say, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It still matters to all of them, still matters to Max. Max will still want to go out there and win. Sebastian is exactly the same, and of course Lewis is the same thing, and even Valtteri Bottas will want to try and end it in a strong way. So nothing changes on that front, but the battle has been brilliant because we've had those 2 manufacturers racing each other. We've effectively had the 2 drivers from different teams racing each other, which has been refreshing as well. And overall, I think he's going to be very happy with what he's achieved. Bit of disappointment coming in probably with Singapore, where he did that sort of move going into turn 1, and then everything that happened after that. He couldn't really do anything with the situation we had in Malaysia and Japan. But overall, there's been a massive jump from Ferrari in performance. That's now going to put them, I hope anyway, in better stead when we go into next season as well, because they're not sort of starting, I don't know, 1 second behind the Mercedes. They're starting on a much level playing field, and then that development will sort of run through the winter time, and then we're going to have to wait and see exactly what happens when we come to the first race next season.
Well, let's look at the drivers' standings. We've got Lewis Hamilton, winner, on 333. Sebastian Vettel, 277, which is quite a distance now, isn't it? When you think about, you know, 8-9 races ago we were looking at. Now Valtteri Bottas, 262.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, can he catch him? Two races to go. And
15 points.
Yeah.
It's not very many points at all. And I think that is a motivation that you need as a driver sometimes. I think we've said before, he hasn't been entirely happy with the season that he's had so far, Valtteri. He wants to prove a point. He's hungry to want to be able to prove it, probably to himself, to be perfectly frank. And that would be the perfect scenario. Get those sort of 15 points sort of whittled down in these last 2 races that we've come in, and then finish in second in the World Championship, which we wouldn't have been thinking about a couple of races back. We just thought Valtteri just wasn't quite able to sort of get himself in the position that he needed to be in, which is being either second to Lewis or beating Sebastian, and that hasn't quite happened consistently enough during the season. So this is a very good opportunity for Valtteri to really ramp up, I think, the speed that I think we all believe and know that he's got, and actually prove it to himself, but also prove it to us watching, and then sort of say, right, I've got second in this World Championship. That's a good way to end my first season at Mercedes. Now maybe I can go into a better mental place before the season starts next season. So yeah, it's only 15 points. There is still a lot that can happen.
Off to Interlagos then we go. And what can we expect? I'm guessing people will think that Lewis Hamilton's been sat in a trailer all week with champagne bottles everywhere.
I hope so.
Well, yeah, be a nice text to have, wouldn't it? But
yes.
So
where was it?
You can't do that because you've got 2 races left. So what do we expect to see? What are the weather conditions going to be, and what sort of track is it?
Well, I know at the moment it's sort of a bit mixed, a bit cloudy at the present time. Remember last year? Brilliant race from Max Verstappen. Drove through the field, had to do a pit stop, went back out again, dropped down to about 10th place, I think it was. rocketed it through the pack as well, and then finished in second position, I think it was. So it was a brilliant sign of that talent that Max has got. Brazil is always one of those tricky ones with the weather. It can be beautifully hot, and then actually when you stand in the pit lane, you normally turn behind going in towards turn one, and that's where the weather sort of builds up and then draws itself across the circuit. And when those wet conditions come into play, we just see then a completely sort of diversity of talent and car performances sort of completely changing. So that's where Brazil is very, very good. It's a little bit, I think it's only about 800 metres above sea level, so it's a little bit thinner, nowhere like Mexico. So it's a little bit more of a strain on the engines. But from a driver's perspective, it's a driver's track. You've got the first sort of part of it going through the center S's, center curves, and then onto the back straight. Then it really becomes a proper track. Lots of turns, lots of undulation, lots of off camber, lots of difficulty for the drivers to feel what the car is doing underneath them through the tyre. But of course then it's a difficult job for the engineers as well, because all those different types of corners are a real difficult thing for everybody to get absolutely spot on. So the challenge is going to be getting that middle sector right, which I think is going to favour someone like Red Bull, for example. But of course you still need to have that straight line speed down the main straight and actually down the back straight towards turn 4 as well. So it's got a lot of challenging, and then of course wet or dry doesn't make a big difference, other than you've got to use, when it's wet, use the lines that Max Verstappen was using last year. It's not on the racing line at any point around the circuit, because it's quite an abrasive circuit generally, but of course it fills up with rubber, the gaps between the tarmac. It then gets slightly polished at the same time because of all the racing that goes on through the year. So when it rains, you don't want to be on something that's a polished surface, because it's always going to be very, very slippery. So what you do is what Max did last year. And I remember looking at Damon Hill last year when we were watching it and looking at each other, why aren't the others doing it? It was unbelievable, really. But he just went searching, completely sort of off the racing line, and searching for that grip. You don't go in the polish, you don't go where that rubber is sort of filling in the tarmac itself, because the water will just sit on top. So you try and find it somewhere else. So that challenge then is to find the best grip that you can. Going offline is one thing, you're going to get more grip anyway, but you've got to find as much grip as you possibly can. Not just at one corner or two corners, there's about 15 or so corners there. So you've really got to work very, very hard mentally to just keep on searching, because as the weather conditions change, the grip changes and it moves. So that's the challenge, and I think that's what's great about Brazil.
And as for Lewis, we've heard a lot this season, haven't we, about the spirit of Senna. Do you think this is an important one for him to win? Particularly having come in 9th. Is this the Hollywood finish, do you think, that will eradicate the 9th?
I think it will be a very important one for him, yeah. And you're right, I think Ayrton is something that we all know with Lewis. He's heroed that. It's something that Brazil has still got a big part of what Lewis Hamilton is all about, all due to what Ayrton Senna was able to achieve in his brilliant career. So yeah, I think from that 9th place, but winning the World Championship, he's going to Brazil with that World Championship at a place that he sort of has a certain affinity to because of Ayrton. So I think he'd be very hungry to bounce back, because even after qualifying in Mexico, it wasn't particularly a good performance from Mercedes at all, because they got outdone by Ferrari. Okay, it was unexpected to a degree, but it was the Red Bull that sort of really knocked them as well, knocked them from that front row. So yeah, Brazil I think will be a very important one for him to bounce back as the world champion and do it in Brazil.
Where do we see the pole positions come in then? 1, 2, 3. Where do you see it?
At this present time, and I only do this generally from a little bit my experiences, when you do win a race, it is amazing how powerful that is for the following race. And I think Max, and coming out and saying about, I want to dominate Formula One, I think it's a track that will actually suit them. That middle sector will actually work for them very, very, very well, as it has done in the last couple of seasons. Those two long straights, the main straight and the back straight, I don't think it'd be such a problem that they have been maybe earlier in the season, because the Red Bull definitely seems to be much slicker now in a straight line. The power unit, as I said, the Renault has definitely sort of improved. So if you put all that together, I think Brazil actually is going to be a place for Max Verstappen to actually really maybe hook that up and get that pole position. But as we saw in Mexico, it was only, what, 0.086, I think it was, that he was off Sebastian Vettel. So Brazil's going to be very, very close at the same time. And I think, again, we're looking at probably that Ferrari and that Red Bull once again battling it out for that pole position. But let's not rule out Lewis Hamilton at all, because for sure he's going to be hungry to do it. The track should suit them actually because of those long straights. The car's not particularly that bad historically in Brazil, so I think overall we've got those three battling it for it. But I'm probably going to go for Max, Sebastian, Lewis.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the odds then. Lewis Hamilton is evens, Sebastian Vettel 7-2.
Okay.
Max Verstappen 4-1.
Yeah.
Fair?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Ricardo 15-2. And we know about these odds now, don't we?
Yeah.
We've gone through them. Valtteri Bottas 12-1. He's out there now. Bottas's odds they've gone a little bit now, haven't they? You can actually.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one for someone to have a go on, because, as I said, I think he'd be hungry to try and sort of whittle down that 15 points difference to Sebastian Vettel. He's got the car. We know that because Lewis has been able to do that. We know he can win in the car because he's done that in the past. So there's no reason, if it all comes together for him, mentally he's in the right place, the car feels as he wants it to feel on a track that is very, very technically difficult from an engineering point of view, but also from a driver's point of view. If he gets those right, I think he can achieve the possibility of beating Sebastian Vettel. And then we've got a real great situation for the last race in Abu Dhabi, because obviously he's not going to, unless Sebastian doesn't finish, which is all possible because of all the problems that Ferrari had. Now, if that happens, of course, he's just going to sort of leapfrog in front of him straight away without doing actually anything particularly. So he needs a strong performance, and those odds I think are very, very good for him. But I think so are the Red Bulls. I think that's a great odd for them, especially in the position that we've seen him more recently, especially with Max doing so well in Japan, but especially in Mexico. But you can't rule out his teammate either. I think Daniel will be very, very hungry to do a result, and we know he can do it. Hasn't had the best of luck, hasn't been quite, I don't know, working for him in every possible way, but I think Brazil is one of those challenging tracks that the driver will be the one who can actually just do that a little bit more, get a little bit more out of himself, and then that will actually sort of relate to the lap time that they got. So those Red Bulls are going to be very, very strong as well. So now it's probably very unfair ruling him out when you asked me about the pole position. So I'm going to throw Daniel into that one as well.
Excellent. Johnny, thank you as ever. We're off to find a favela now to dunk our nuts in chocolate, Brazil nuts obviously.
Yes.
You can check out all the latest odds on betsafe.com, and remember, you've got to be in it to win it.